Modern nationalism in Europe came to be associated with the formation of nation states. It also meant a change in people's understanding of who they were and what defined their identity and sense of belonging. New symbols and icons, new songs and ideals forged new links and redefined the boundaries of communities. In India and in many other colonies, the growth of modern nationalism is intimately connected to the anti colonial movement. People began discovering their unity in the process of the struggle with colonization, with these colonies, with these rulers. The sense of being oppressed under the colonialism provided a shared bond that tied many different groups together. But each class and group felt the effect of colonization differently. Their experiences were varied, and their notions of freedom were not always the same. Correct. So each and every class in India had different effects of this colonization. The workers, the peasants, the industrialists, okay, the educated, the uneducated lot. And their notion, that is their understanding of freedom, were not always the same. Congress under Mahatma Gandhi tried to forge these groups, tried to bind these groups together within one movement. But the unity did not emerge without a conflict. It was not easy to bring all these groups together who had a different understanding of freedom. Correct? And so this unity was brought in by Mahatma Gandhi, but it did not emerge without conflicts between these groups. Okay. Let's begin with the first part of our chapter, and that is with the part of First World War. What was the situation of India at that time? What changes took place after India participated, being a colony from the side of British in the First World War? We are going to analyze this situation in this part. So, let us start. Let me begin by telling you a story. When war broke out in 1914, India was in a state of growing political unrest. The Indian National Congress had gone from being a group that simply discussed issues to a body that was pushing for self government. Indian nationalism at that time was dominated by the moderates, who believed that India's contribution to the British war effort would result in British benevolence towards the natives and would grant them more constitutional reforms. They believed that if we support the cause of war, if we stand with Britain in World War I, it is possible that their attitude towards the natives will change and they would be ready to grant us more constitutional rights. More constitutional reforms can be expected if we support them in World War I. Indian army was distinct from the nationalist movements as magazines, newspapers were not allowed in the barracks and so they fought for the British Raj. When war was declared, India rallied to the cause. Those with influence within India believed that the cause of India's independence would be best served by helping out Britain in whatever capacity India could. Even the Indian National Congress felt the same way. Offers of financial and military help were made from all over the country. Wealthy princely states offered great sum of money and even areas outside of British India offered help. So everybody was ready to help Britain during the World War I. Indian National Congress, wealthy princely states, they came together to offer financial and military help because they felt that Indian independence could be is possible if they support Britain's cause. The Indian support given to Britain's cause surprised the establishment in Britain. People in Britain were surprised that a colony is supporting Britain during the World War I. Okay, its own colony, people on whom we are ruling, they are ready to support us. Okay. The Indian Corps won, that is, Indian soldiers won 13,000 medals for gallantry, including 12 Victorian Crosses. Such was the cost of the war that India's economy was pushed near bankruptcy just because we supported war, just because we handed over all our funds during the war to Britain. So now our economy was at the brink of bankruptcy. For its endeavor, India expected to be rewarded with major move towards independence, or at least they felt that they will get self-government. When it became very obvious that this was not going to happen, the mood in India became more militant. Hmm. Even the leaders had supported the war. They had expected that they will receive independence from British government. But British government's post-war attitude quickly alienated Indian leaders. And this was a great stimulus for independence movement. This was the starting of the independence movement. So, this was the story, that how we were moved towards economic bankruptcy, how we were moved towards the bankruptcy as we had handed over all our funds during World War I, and it was also going to have a political change, correct? There was also going to be a political upheaval over here, correct? And that is what is given in our textbook. So the story was just for the reference, that you understand that why we went from in bankruptcy, why economic turmoil was there, why we faced economic challenges. All right, now let's read the key points which are there in our textbook. So war created a new economic and political situation. Let's understand what economic situation had been created because of the war. It led to a huge increase in defense expenditure, which had to be financed by war loans and increasing taxation. Correct? Custom duties were raised and income tax was introduced. Income tax was introduced, and there was a custom duty on most of the products. Throughout the years, throughout the years of war, prices increased. Prices of daily necessity products increased, almost doubling between the year 1913 and 1918, which created lot of hardship for common man, because it was the daily requirement food, the necessity food, the required commodities which they could not purchase because prices were increasing. There was forceful recruitment of people from the rural areas during into the military, as soldiers. So there was a lot of anger among the people. Then, in the year 1918 to 1919 and 1920 to 1921, crops failed in many parts of India, resulting in acute shortage of food. Hmm. There was a condition which was created, environmental condition which was created, and because of which crops failed in many parts of the country, and which resulted in acute shortage of food. This was again accompanied by an influenza epidemic in the country. According to the census of 1921, 12 to 13 million people perished as a result of the famine and epidemic. Because of the famine, as there was no food, no crop, no water, and because of the influenza epidemic, as they were not getting any medication, British government was not at all paying any attention to this colony. People had hoped that their hardships would end after the war, but this did not happen. As you remember the story which I did mention to you before I started reading the points for what happened after World War I. So yes, people hoped that their hardships would be reduced after the after the war was over, but that did not happen. So now at this stage, as the Indian National Congress leaders understand that it is not going to take place, it's not going to happen, British government is not going to give us independence or not even self-governance, new leaders appear and suggest a new mode of struggle. So now the moderates who were thinking that there will be a change and we will have our self-governance, it is not going to happen, and we find that new leadership is going to come ahead and suggest a mode of struggle. Let's understand at this stage who is the new leader who is going to appear and suggest a new novel method of struggle. Mahatma Gandhi returned to India in January 1915. As you very well know, he had come from South Africa where he had successfully fought the racist regime with a new and a novel method of mass agitation, which he called Satyagraha. Satyagraha means urge for Satya or truth. Satyagraha is not merely the insistence on truth, it is in fact holding on to truth through ways which are moral and non violent. According to Gandhiji, truth is what the inner self experiences at any point of time. It is an answer to one's consciences. It is what responds to one's moral self. He was convinced that knowledge alone leads a person to truth, while ignorance takes one away from the truth. He further says that through Satyagraha, it is not the imposition of one's will over other. We are not imposing our will over other, but it is appealing to the reasoning of the opponent who is not ready to listen. Okay, it is not coercion, but it is persuasion. You are persuading the person to understand what is right and what is wrong. Gandhiji highlights several attributes of Satyagraha. He says it is a moral weapon and does not entertain any ill feeling towards the adversary. He says that actions of the person should be condemned but not the person himself, just like Nelson Mandela. It is a non-violent device which calls upon its user to not to hate the enemy. It does not make the opponent weaker. It does not make you weaker if you do not react. If you do not react in a violent manner, that doesn't mean you are weak. But it strengthens us morally. It strengthens the person morally. It is a weapon of the brave, and it is constructive in its approach. All right, so a brave person can actually use the weapon of non-violence, Satyagraha, and it is a constructive approach. It is not a destructive approach, it is a constructive approach which helps the person and opponent to understand his mistake, act upon it, and think morally, think through the moral means. That is what Satyagraha is. Idea of Satyagraha emphasizes the power of the truth and the need to search the truth. And Satyagrahi can very well win the battle through non-violence. This could be done by appealing to the conscience of the oppressor. And therefore, he is saying that by this struggle, truth was bound to ultimately triumph. He says that this is the method which we can use. It is a dharma of non-violence. And this is the only way that we can unite all Indians together and go forward for the cause of independence, Swaraj.